Today's difficult project on Our Garage Time is to inspect and verify that this thermostat for the Porsche 911 is working correctly. This is what controls the oil flow to the front of the car for additional cooling. So you gotta have oil cooling on these air-cooled cars, oil-cooled cars. I can tell there's no marks on it. This one's never been taken apart in like 45 years. So, like with any Garage Time episode, we usually take things apart with the welder. So let's make a custom tool. Never gets old. Well, maybe. We'll probably use something like that to make something. And then I have this plate here. This is not just any old plate. This is high strength steel, 4340 chromoly. That's what's gonna go inside the slot here. Or I think it will. I might have to grind it down a little bit. I think it fits in this side. That's better, kind of protect the threads a little bit. I'm not gonna cut this with my bandsaw because the steel is probably a little too hard. So we'll have to use a grinder, and I'll just use my angle grinder to kind of create that curve shape. Plasma cutter is also possible. I did grind down the back side of that because this plate was a little too thick, but and this guy also goes in, but it's a little bit looser. I just welded two of the same plates on either side, so it gives it a little bit of stability, and also it won't bend under the torque of the wrench. I welded it there on three sides. And then originally my plan was to put this tubing over the outside of the nut or the bolt or whatever this is. That was going to, weld to this and kind of prevent it from, slipping out or teetering over. But it feels pretty good. I think I'm just gonna go ahead and try it like this first. If it won't break free, then I may have to add the tubing. This kind of seems counterintuitive that I'm clamping it down. I'm trying to remove it, but I want to make sure this thing stays in the slot as I put some torque on it. Okay, here we go. This is the problem with my table, is it's on wheels, and so I like it on wheels because I have a small space here, but in this case, I need it to stay put. So let me try to block the wheels a little bit, hold the table down, because these things are on tight. I'm also going to give it a few light taps. Okay, here we go. Tighten the vise down too. All right. And here we go. Oh, I think that did it. Voila. Okay, I don't know exactly what's in there at the moment, so it feels like a spring. I'm gonna kind of leave it loose, but that's good. Popped it right out of there. So there's the tool, no real bending or anything on it. I should have filed this edge right here. There's a little sharp edge and it sort of put a mark on there, but that'll just polish out if I want. Doesn't really matter. Okay, because this tool doesn't fit as well as the other one does, and it's a smaller one, I thought it needed more stability. So I just put this little half moon piece and this half ring around the edge of the tool. So I'm gonna weld that along the edge and then right there a fillet weld, and we'll try it out. So it goes halfway around. This part has a little, this part's pretty close to this thread here. So I think just half a circle should be adequate to keep this thing from just, you know, slipping off or coming this way. It fits on there really nice. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna shim it with a little bit of adhesive back sandpaper. Yeah, it feels a little tighter maybe, but let's just go for it. Another reason for leaving that guy in there is it is easier to clamp it. We have to be really careful when this breaks free, we don't run the wrench right into those threads. So let me think of a way to protect that. I remember this as I think a piece of my kid's bike, like the foot peg or whatever. So he outgrew the bike. Oh, this one's tight. There we go. Once it's loose, it's loose. And this one feels like it has a spring in there too. So just need to be careful. A lot of threads on that. Okay. There is a crush washer here, which is aluminum. So big spring, it looks like it's a standard spring, doesn't really matter which is top or bottom. Both ends are ground flat. All right, this is full of gunk too. It's just sludge. I mean, like I said, this has never been apart in probably 40 years. Same thing, big copper or big aluminum washer. Spring. Yeah, so this looks like it's the actual thermostat element. So we'll put that here in this tray. And I don't think anything else comes apart, but I'm now seeing inside there is some debris. And that's what I wanted to clean before I ran this in my car. So the oil lines have steel fittings, and this is an aluminum. So often what happens is they get corroded together over time, especially in the presence of water because it sits up in the wheel well. So if you can't break them free with penetrating oil, then it's best to cut the nuts off of the tubing. And Elephant Racing makes some replaceable nuts that you can basically repair the whole tubing. But the nuts are much cheaper than this assembly. So these things, even used ones, are like $300 or $400. So the nuts from Elephant Racing are good insurance to prevent you from damaging the threads. If you put a wrench on it and it just feels like it's galling the whole way off, if it doesn't loosen up once you get that first half turn, then it's best just to stop and cut the nuts off, the steel nuts off, and then use the Elephant Racing ones. I'll put a link in the description below for those. It's about time to change the water in this, but I think I'll do the first cleaning of these, and then we'll change the water and clean it again. So I kind of like to, just help this thing along. Especially inside the threads there, it just makes pretty quick work of this. Parts are back in now with clean water. This is just dish soap too. So sometimes you need to let all the bubbles get out of the solution, like that trapped bubble right there. We just let the bubbles rise to the top, then we hit it again. There we go. And then some of these like stubborn black dots, I'm hitting with the stainless brush. Also, there's a little bit of sealant on some of the threads, so I'm using this sharp pick just in the threaded area. It's nice to have clean parts. Here are the parts laid out in the correct order as shown in the workshop manual. So nothing's missing. It's ready to reassemble, but I think it's wise to check this guy and make sure it's functioning correctly with temperature. So this is the thermostat. It moves as it heats up. So I'll put this in some boiling water and we'll monitor the temperature and see what happens. Make sure it has some movement. These are replaceable. These parts are available new. So if it doesn't work, we can always get a new one. But I prefer to have good used parts versus the new stuff. I don't think the quality control is the same on the new stuff as it was when it was new. So it's about 180 right now. I'm outside in my barbecue area too. Looks like this plunger's moving just a little bit. Zero. Okay, that's about 190. Let's check it again. Much more movement on the plunger. 255. Starting to get a boil now. Come back. Yeah, that's about, yeah, that's 210. That plunger's moved a lot. That's 212, which is boiling. 436. And while we're in the mode of cooking things and heating things up, I have my toaster oven set to broil. And I'm gonna broil these aluminum crush washers. So typically these are only used once. They squish down, they get hard, and then they do their job once. But I don't have any new ones of these, and I don't wanna wait to get some more. So you can anneal these in the oven. 500, 600 degrees is probably enough. That's gonna make them soft again so you can recrush them. So I'm just gonna heat it up, leave it in there for probably about an hour, go have some iced tea. It's nowhere near the melting temperature of aluminum, so I don't think they're gonna distort or anything. And meanwhile, over here on this side, I have this plunger. This is the pressure relief valve in case, say for instance, you hit bottom and you crush your oil lines that go to the front. That could create a lot of pressure. This would relieve the pressure and just send the oil back to the tank. So that's what this guy is. And I'm just making sure that there's no sharp edges inside the bore and that this piece can slide in and out nice and easy. So there's no obstruction there. There's no wear to this because it's only a safety valve. It probably has never been used. This is the thermostat side, and it also seems to go in quite well. Now that everything's cleaned, it just drops in and out. So there are some sharp areas inside there where these bores intersect. So just make sure there's no burrs that would prevent this from moving. So now we know that this plunger extends when it gets warm, and that's gonna push this out, and it's gonna expose oil through these holes here into a new passage. So when it's all the way down, the oil comes in from the engine, it gets blocked by that surface, and it comes back right to the oil tank. But when this is extended out, it then blocks this section and it diverts it out to this section, which is to the oil cooler. It goes out to the oil cooler, and then it returns here and goes back to the tank. Just using a little bit of motor oil, clean motor oil, just lube this up. Drop that in. It's started. Okay, that should be tight enough. Yeah, this one's a lot easier to get started. There we go. Yep, shot that plug out too. So things are sealing pretty well. And then I'm just pushing and turning. I'm not using the clamp on the assembly, but I'm just feeling that washer crush. That should be good. It's ready to install now. The sealing surface is actually not the threads. It's this inner cone here. It matches up with the cone on the oil lines, which is actually steel. So it's a steel on aluminum fitting. And so you can see this one has a little bit of a ridge on it, but I think it'll be okay. It's, you know, just something to look for. It's probably better to leave that alone. It didn't cost me anything, and I got a lot of peace of mind knowing that this thing functions and it's not missing any parts and there's no debris or sludge in it anymore. So that's a win. I do have another video on the oil lines. If you're interested how to repair the crushed oil lines, I'll put a link to that video right here. The whole oiling system is really important on these cars, so you don't want to have any damaged components. And I'm using an aftermarket oil cooler on the front. If you want to see that video for the front mounted oil cooler, click that one right here. Cheers guys, see you next week.